Welcome to On the Bauble Podcast Episode 7. I'm your host, Tsubasa J. Ueda, and with me is my co-host, Yuki Lee Bender. I want an episode today where I can recommend people to watch if they were qualified for nationals, but don't regularly play draft. So today, we're going to do a top 10 cards in Uprising draft. But before we go into any of that, how was your week, Yuki?
My week's been honestly really busy. School year. So for anybody that doesn't know, I'm a teacher, and school year started, I guess, last week when we recorded. So yeah, it's just been like getting classes set up, getting familiar with the kids, getting used to being back at work instead of being home all day for a couple months. So it's a bit of a shift, and I've been pretty busy. And then when I do have spare time, it's been a lot of testing for nationals. I haven't been drafting much. I keep finding myself wanting to draft and then being like, I have no idea what I'm playing for Nats since, Prism, one of my comfort picks, is gone. And then that meant Guardian, very good. And I don't really like Viserai or Lexi into Guardians. So yeah, basically all my comfort picks I'm not super happy with right now. And it's a lot of just like trying to learn a new deck without that much time to do so. How was your week, Jay?
My week, this weekend I played the last chance qualifier for the Canadian Nationals Magic Stronghold games. I ended up winning that event, but I already had my invite, so I actually didn't need to win it at all. And I think that my friend Lucas, who got second in that event, also has his invites already. So I don't know if it passes down to third for these LCQs, but if it does, I guess third place got the invite.
I was told by Max that he got the invite and he came in third, but I don't know. So I think it does, but I'm not 100% sure either.
Okay, that's pretty sweet. So at least someone got an invite. And I ended up playing Viserai for the event. I wanted to play Oldham this week, but I realized I just didn't own all the cards for it the morning of. And I emergency ordered all the Oldham cards yesterday night, and they should be arriving in the mail in the next 2 days before I fly out from Canadian Nationals. For those who don't know, Canadian National is 1 week before US Nats. So we're going to have our Nationals before the US Nats.
Yeah, it'll be on the weekend of the 18th, 17th, 17th and 18th, I think, whatever the Saturday and Sunday is.
Yes, the 17-18.
How are you feeling? How are you feeling for nationals, Jay? Are you feeling ready? Not so, or what do you think?
Honestly, I don't typically play test that much. It's like not part of what I do for Flesh and Blood, at least in Constructed. I tend to I like to know all the cards in the format and what all the decks do, and then I just pick up whichever deck I feel like is the best positioned, and then just pilot that, and hopefully get like one or two or maybe three games in before the event. But the draft portion, I'm pretty excited about. I want to try and go 3-0. I might push for it. Honestly, I might do some aggressive picks. I might make some aggressive picks to try and move into maybe even Dromai or Icelander. Or even I might make some aggressive picks to try and push people off of Fi. We'll see.
Yeah, that's interesting that you mentioned that. That's something I've been thinking about as well, especially after reviewing Matt Rogers' draft. That, you know, maybe if you start strong in something and you get 5 strong picks and then you get a strong second pack, like maybe that's good enough. And in pack 3, like if it's hard to tell, like if come pick 5-ish you're getting cut, like it's possible that the person passing you to moved into your deck, but it's also entirely possible that they could be like 3 seats away and then you're going to get like another 3 or 4 good picks in the next pack, and like maybe that's just good enough in a format that's like pretty tight on playables anyways. So yeah, it's interesting after seeing that. As like, maybe not that like you hard force. I think you do have to be willing to pivot if you're getting cut really hard. But yeah, maybe solidifying early is more valid in this set than others.
Yeah, maybe my plan is to like bring a Dromai mat and like wear a Dromai clothing, Dromai hat, and just be very open about I'm gonna be a Dromai player, and then maybe everyone else will move off. I don't think that actually works though.
I, I would be careful, especially with the I'm going to be a Dromai player part. Judges could crack down on that for sure.
That's true. That's true.
They can't crack down on the mat or the clothing, but if they see you with all that and then you're just like talking about how you love Dromai, like that might not be a great move.
Okay, well, let's move on to our main topic today. So, for our top 10 draft list, we are going to include all of the M's, the rares, and the commons. The only exceptions would be the L's and obviously the tokens. We're not going to be talking about those ones. The L's are pretty simple. If they are included, all of them with block values will be on the top of the list. To prevent a very boring list of talking about just L's that you'll never see in a typical draft, and how strong we think some of these M's are compared to the commons.
So I think in terms of format, we're gonna take turns. We're gonna start at number 10, and we're gonna take turns. We're gonna alternate sharing a card first, and then if Jay names Healing Bomb as his 10th best card, and I go, actually, I have Healing Bomb as my number one card. I would say that and say why I think it's my number one. Spoilers: Healing Bomb is not on my list.
Also, not on my list, unfortunately, for all those people who like Healing Bomb.
Do you want to get started first, Jay, or?
Yep, I think I will start then. So, for my number 10, I put down Invoke Necria. It's a rare for Dromai. It's 3 costs that attacks for 4 and has 7 health. And whenever it deals damage or is dealt damage, it puts a -1 counter and generates an Ash.
Why do you have Necria at your? So Necria is also on my list. I have it at 4, but why do you have Necria up at number 10 slot there, Jay?
Wow, number 4 for Necria?
Yeah.
That's strong for Necria. I think it being a 3-cost dragon, there's like 2 other dragons actually on the list that's slightly higher than Necria for me. I'm suspecting when you say number 4, the other dragons are lower than it. But I really do like the card.
Mm-hmm.
But everything else on the list from 1 to 9 for me is just like a higher priority for me. And I would just like to have multiple copies of all the cards above them, except for obviously the equipments that I have. I think it's just the third best dragon to have overall. The spoiler alert, I do have one mythic dragon above it. But
Interesting.
yeah. Why do you have it at number 4, Yuki?
For me, I feel like, and I'm not super confident in this since Dromai is definitely my least drafted hero, but I feel like where I'm at right now is Necria is probably the most important card in the deck for me. I just feel like, for one, it's quite a beating against Icelander. The card's very, very good, and it's also very good in the mirror as it generates so much material. And even against Fi, like, it's very solid. So I like that it's functional in like all of your matchups. And the other thing that I like about Necria, I hear you on it being expensive, but I find generating Ash and Dromai in most matchups to be on the inefficient side and not always easy to do. And I like that once you, like, in the games where you get an early Necria, it just feels like you have Ash for the rest of the game. And I really like that about the card. So I just think like the combination of being well statted and then like once you get it, you're just kind of like rolling in Ash and then your deck just functions smoother, makes me feel like um, I like the car. I like my deck significantly better if I have a Necria than I don't. I could see your point about maybe the second Necria isn't as good. I've actually never been in a spot where I have more than one Necria, so I don't know what that's like. But I think having one seems like a pretty high priority to me. So that's why I have it at number 4.
Yeah, I think I like that. I like my first Necria as well. I just don't know if I had the option to get a second Necria that if I wanted to play 2 Necrias. And I think that's probably what's putting me lower putting this card lower on the list than the other cards.
Fair enough. So I'll move on to my number 10. My number 10 is Aether Ice Vein. I specified the red one. I think all the pitches are pretty good, but I do think that the red one is the best. I know that considering, I feel like I talk about this card a lot, and it might surprise people that it's only number 10. It's interesting. I think I've actually come down slightly on Aether Ice Veins, just in the sense that I think you can have too many. I've had like 6 Aether Ice Veins, and my deck was not that good. And I know other people who have had the same experience that also love Aether Ice Veins. So I think there is like a sweet spot around 3 or 4, which I think does make it a very high pick because like if you want 3 or 4 copies of the card, it's very good. But it's come down slightly for me, and I think that while Aether Ice Vein is a very very powerful card and like one of my favorite Icelander cards, I think that some of the other cards on the list are either just a bit more universal or just a little bit higher impact. So like it's a card that I always want in my Icelander deck, but it feels like more like a bread and butter card than a true like standout power card, I guess.
Actually, I don't have Aether Ice Vein on this list. I was debating if I should put Aether Ice Vein number 10 over Necria or if I should put Necria on 10, and I thought Necria was just way better. So I ended up
Mhm.
putting Necria on the list over the Ice Vein. I do like Ice Vein, and I think I do play multiples too, but I just don't like how the card is not really flexible. And when you
Mhm.
play it, it has like one rule, which is to disrupt your opponent and kill your opponent, which is obviously good. But I just like having a little bit more flexibility in Icelander. And as you said, like the red one's really good, but the yellow one's slightly less good, and then the blue one has good place to it, but it is a little bit awkward. So it actually was like number 11 for me, essentially, if I had to put an 11th card down.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. Sounds like we're pretty close on Aether Ice Vein then.
Okay, so then I'll move on to my number 9. I have number 9, Aether Hail. So Aether Hail is the one cost for the red. It deals 4 damage to any target, and it's an ice card. It's a very simple card, and I like this card a lot because it just is super flexible. You want a lot of blues and Icelanders already, and the red one does 4 damage on play, and then without much work, if you've pitched a blue, you can use your what is that card called?
Waning Moon.
Waning Moon. Waning Moon. So you're essentially doing, it's a 6 point damage spell at red for one cost. And if you ever have hands when you have double red, you can pitch a red to play this to do 4 damage. It's just like super strong. And the one that I really like is the blue version of this Aether Hail, where it's doing 2 damage, which is a very annoying and very real amount of damage. And if you have a blue, essentially does 5 damage with the Waning Moon on your opponent's turn and giving them an Frostbite with Icelander's ability. So I think this card's super efficient, and I would love to have basically all the colors and as many as I can get in Icelander because it does basically everything in that deck.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I think it's not quite on my list. It'd probably be like an honorable mention. It was close. I do value Aether Ice Vein above Aether Hail just because I find the effect. I agree with you about the flexibility, but I find the effect a little bit less replaceable. So I kind of value getting like the first couple Aether Ice Veins higher, and then after that, I prioritize the Aether Hails. Um, so yeah, I think it was a card that I considered, but considering that Aether Ice Vein made it in a 10th, it just kind of like barely got edged out. Yeah, probably like my 11th or 12th card if we went that high.
Yeah, I think that's fair. What's your number 9?
My number 9 is Blaze Headlong, the 4 cost, the 4 power, 0 cost draconic attack action card that defends for 2 and has go again if you have played a red card. I'm a big fan of Blaze Headlong. I just think that when you have it in your deck, it feels like a huge increase in power level. It is definitely at its best in Fi, but I still think that it is a totally reasonable card in Dromai, especially if your Dromai deck is like on the stronger end. And yeah, I just feel like it is one of the cards that really kind of like it's interesting because I feel like Fi suffers a little bit from having a lot of good cards and a lot of redundancy, but not a lot of standout cards. And to me, Blaze Headlong is like maybe the standout card, and you pretty much play any number of these, and it being flexible and going multiple decks, I think, is also really good. So not an exciting card, but yeah.
I have Blaze Headlong at number 8, so that was gonna be my next card I was gonna talk about. So pretty close, honestly, to where I value it as well. I think it's just a very powerful card, and it just hits so hard, and it often all has go again. It's like a little bit easier to do and more reliable to do than the generic one, which was
Trade
uh
in
not trade in the 4 power for red. Scar for
Scar.
Scar. Yeah, I thought it was a little bit better than Scar. I find it. I don't have Scar anywhere near this list just because from playing with it enough, I feel like it's a little bit hard to get the go again on the card, and I think Blaze Headlong is just like a lot easier to get the go again, and it is a draconic card, so it just works way better with Fi. I think that's why I like this card a lot.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on Scar for a Scar. It's also not on my list or particularly close. I think it's a good card. I like having some. Like it's a card I'm happy to pick up kind of like mid pack.
Yeah, it's like a filler.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Another nice thing that I like about Blaze Headlong that doesn't come up so much in Fi because you're wanting to keep your hand and play it out, but in Dromai, it's also totally reasonable just to block with 3 cards and then play Blaze Headlong for 4 off of 1. And then if you block for 3 cards, that's 9 block if they're 3 blocks, and you come in for 4, that's like a 13-point turn cycle, which is pretty solid. That's like the Oldham thing from Tales. So yeah, just very nice.
All right, do you want to move on to your number 8 then?
Yeah, my 8 is Feindel's Fighting Spirit. I guess red or yellow. Honestly, I find them fairly interchangeable. I think that there's not that many poppers in this set, and for me, Feindel's Fighting Spirit is a significantly better popper than Brother in Arms, just because of the life gain, and because I also like that. I guess I like that the red one comes in. I like the extra power that the red one comes in for 7, or the yellow has the flexibility of also being a pitch card. I think both of those things are really good. It also kind of blocks 3 because you can often I find that like damage comes in big enough chunks that you can often find a way to block with this where you get the life gain later on, and it can help with like Fi's breakpoints. So I think it's like a good card on offense and defense, and like goes into every deck, and it's a card that I find very hard to pass. Pretty much at any point in the draft, honestly. It always just feels so powerful.
I don't have this card on my list. It was actually on like the part of my 13 cards they pulled up, but I ended up not putting it on the list just because I didn't really know which decks I wanted them in particular. Like I pick it up almost all the time because it's like such a flexible pick. But I think I like this card more as a flexible, like to keep myself open more than a card that I actively want in most of my decks. Like I just would rather have zero cost go agains in Fi. I'd rather just have blues in Icelander, and in Dromai I think I'd rather have just her class cards over this card.
That's fair enough. I think for me, my thought process is that in Dromai, I like it because it's like not only is it good in the mirror, and not only is it kind of like a Embermaw Senpai in a way. I know that you can't do like the 1 cost into it, but you can just play it for often like an 8-point swing, which I find to be pretty strong. And it's also just one less popper that you have to play against. I think is a pretty real consideration. Like there's few enough poppers in the pool that whenever you take a popper, that's one less popper that is in another player's deck. Um, and then I agree with you in Fi, it's maybe at its worst, but in Icelander, I actually quite like this card, and I play it in every matchup. I find because you start on the lower life, it's pretty easy to get the life gain on this when you attack with it. And I found myself often want to like pitch a blue, play a 1 cost in Waning Moon, pitch a blue, and play this and then arsenal a card. And I found that play pattern pretty good. You're not doing any blocking if you're doing it, but you do get the kind of life gain as a buffer, and it's usually a lot of damage that you're throwing. So yeah, I found it to be pretty strong, but I agree that in Fi it's kind of lacking. I think I also value reds in Icelander more than the majority of players. I agree that you want to have the solid blues, but like I feel like the quality reds is what makes the great Icelander decks from the medium ones.
Yeah, I think though that's a very fair point. Okay, so my number 7 is Invoke Dominia. I think this is like the best one of the best dragons in the set. I think it's a little bit better than Necria. It is almost just as big, and when you do have it in your deck, you do want a little bit higher red count so that it does trigger off it. But when you get to rip a card out of your opponent's hand, it's always going to be their best card, and it just wrecks their turn. Unlike Tomotai and Optimi, which I think those are just a little bit too overcosted, where it's hard to play them, the Minia is a little bit more reasonable to play. All you need is one blue and you can get it down. And if you can rip a card out of their hand, sometimes you can even keep the Minia on the board for a second turn. And if you do that, you can really just run away with the game. And I think this card is like closest thing to a bomb in this set that we're gonna get. So I think that's why I like this card a lot.
That's reasonable. I haven't had the chance to play with Dominia personally. It's not on my list, actually. I think that it is a powerful card when resolved, and I agree with you that when you get the red off of it and you get the discard effect, the Thoughtseize effect, where you look at their hand, take a card, and banish it, I think it's incredible and a house. The thing that I don't enjoy about Necria, at least from like a theory perspective, and from when I've seen it
Dominia.
played against, sorry, Dominia, is that it costing 4 means that it's always a 3-card play, and I find that Dromai is often pressured on cards. I think against Icelander, you're tight on pitch pretty much all the time. Against Fi, you rarely have the time to keep 3 cards and play this. The other thing that I don't like, and maybe this is just from like the limited games that I played, but it's sort of strange in that like you need blues to cast Dominia to be able to pay for the cost, but then the more blues you have, the less consistency you have on the revealing a red. And boy, I've had an opponent play Dominia and miss, and it feels game losing. Assuming that you can kill it. If I can't kill it, then it's still pretty good. But I feel like if you keep a 3-card hand to attack for 4, and then it's like a 4 back, that's like a 3-card hand that is like an 8-point swing. It's like pretty below rate considering it also uses your Ash. So I find the inconsistency on it like a little bit intimidating, and the cost on it, like it having to be 3 cards as opposed to Necria, which is 1 card, is why I'm not as much of a fan.
Yeah, I think exactly what your point is, though, is the reason why I like it is on the lowest rate, it is basically a 8 damage cycle. So on its worst case scenario, you're looking at an 8, and on its best case scenario, you're ripping away 4 damage from their hand, or even more. You can be like ripping out their blue if that's the thing that's gonna allow them to do the damage on the next turn. So when you do get to rip a card out of your opponent, like it could easily save you 5 or like 4 life easily by ripping their best card. And if they happen to have poppers, you can rip the popper, so then the minia gets to live. I think the upside of you having that ability to like make that 8-turn cycle basically into like what I think of like virtually 12, or even like maybe even 13 if you get like a really sick hand off of the Dominia. I think that upside is going to be worth it for you to do. And obviously it's not as like, you do need to have that density of reds. Like you do need to have enough reds in your deck. Like you can't just play this card in like any drill by deck. You do have to build around it a little bit. But I think that it's worth that cost because you already want a good density of resin Dromai, and I think the Minia has that highest upside of like stealing a game while still being reasonable to cast.
Yeah, that that makes total sense to me. I think it just comes down to like what your like risk tolerance is and how consistent you want the card to be. But yeah, I agree that when it does its thing, it is very likely to win the game.
What is your number 7, Yuki?
My number 7 is Insidious Chill. Similar to Dominia, I think it is a build around card. You cannot just throw this in an Icelander deck. And the reason I only have it at the number 7 is not only does it have the deck building restriction of you needing enough ice cards as well as enough cards that want to fuse, and you don't want to be playing like bad fuse cards to play this. You want to be playing like ones that you would play anyways. So if you're like loading up on a bunch of is it Polar Cap, the like 2 for 4 a red that makes a frostbite if it's fused, like you don't want to be doing that. So the card asks quite a bit of you, but in a lot of games, if you can resolve Insidious Chill, it will probably cost you tempo early, but if you can do it with enough time to like turn the corner on it, it just completely takes over the game. And I think it has that kind of the same uh, bomb feeling. And just if you do this repeatedly, like the first time is like quite good, and then the second time it just feels it starts to feel like pretty unfair. And the third proc is like almost always. I don't think I've ever lost when I've procced Insidious Chill 3 times, especially in combination with if you have like the Aether Ice Veins to support this. I think yeah, whenever you're ripping either 2 cards or 4 resources from their hand, it just pretty much turns off their entire turn. So I found this card to be like and it's a blue. It's also just like a blue ice card that you can fuse with and pitch and do other things with. So yeah, I'm a big fan of this card, especially early or if my draft is going well and can support it. Just understand that sometimes you have to pitch it. There is such a thing as like sometimes you're just too low on life and it's too late in the game for this card, and that's okay. And playing this card on turn 1 is disgusting. I
Yeah, I
think
don't
you,
think you can lose if you play it on turn 1 if your deck
yeah,
is supporting it.
yeah,
Yeah. For the same reasons that you just said, I have Insidious Chill as my number 4. I think this is one of the cards where it's like I open it in my opening hand and I cannot lose the game. And I think this card is powerful enough that like if I see a pack one pick one, I think I'm just gonna pick it and try and build around it. And I think that's that good. And unlike Dominia, where I just wouldn't pack one pick one Dominia, I think Insidious Chill I would pack one pick one. So I think that's just gonna be my difference between like my higher cards and my lower cards. Are the lower cards I don't necessarily pack one pick one, but Insidious Chill I'm pretty open to pack one picking one, which is why it's on my number 4 list.
yeah. Makes a lot of sense to me.
That was your number 7. Can I move on to number 6?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so number 6 I have Silken Form. So Silken Form is Dromai's equipment. It's an arm piece and it has Quell. And its other ability is you can sacrifice it and turn one of your Ash into a Ashwing. It's a pretty simple card, but I think this card is very efficient at blocking damage, and a well-timed Ashwing with the Silken Form can go a lot. Sorry, can go a long ways in dealing more than 1 damage. And I think a good example of it is Mark of Lightning from the last set, Tails, where that 1 damage was pretty big game. I think Silken Form is a little bit better than Mark of Lightning in that it can do multiple instances of 1 damage later in the game, as well as your opponent have to deal with this Ashwing at some point if you flip it early enough. So you're also gaining that 1 life. So this card just swings the like as an equipment where it's like you're not paying a card for it, it generates a lot of value, which is why I like this card a lot.
Yeah, I totally agree. I have Silken Form at number 5 actually, so pretty close. And I think for all the same reasons, it's just this card is almost always going to be worth 2 points, where you attack for 1, and then they deal 1 to kill it, or you get a second attack out of it. Like, it's pretty uncommon that you're not going to get 2 points out of this card. And it can be even higher. So just the fact that you're starting with 2 extra damage slash life just in your equipment is really powerful and pretty far above rate, I think. And I also think that like a Dromai deck that has Silken Form is significantly better than one without. I think it's like a very big power difference there. So
It's like starting with like 22 life instead of 20 life. It's just huge.
yeah, absolutely. My number 6 is actually also an equipment. It's Heat Wave. I think Heat Wave is also very good. I kind of put this responsibly here. I do think that Heat Wave is a strong card, and I've been trying to be disciplined and picking it a little bit higher just because even though I like to start in Icelander or Dromai, Heatwave is just such a hard card to come by because Fi is often contested that I kind of like picking it up early just so that if I do end up wanting to go Fi, I have Heatwave. And similar to Silken Form, it's just damage that you start with and play. In the Icelander matchup, it's almost always worth 2 because you can stop 1 on your turn, and then you can also activate it to get a Phoenix Flame in. And depending on your Fi deck, I think it's not unreasonable to attack with 2 Phoenix Flames with Heatwave and get the +2 on it. Sometimes even just with 1 Ashwing, I've had turns where perhaps with like what is that card? Rise from the Ashes, the bring back a Phoenix Flame, and then your next attack gets +3. I've had turns where I can kind of loop that Phoenix Flame. So I get it back at the start of the turn with Rise from the Ashes, play an attack, play my Phoenix Flame, close the chain, start the chain again, and get it back on the Fi activation. And so even like that way, I've gotten 2 activations out of it. And I think it's like, for me, it's a little worse than Silken Form. That's why I have it at 6 and Silken Form 5. Yeah.
I actually don't have Heat Wave on my list. I'm firmly on the camp when I play Fi. I don't want Phoenix Flames in my main board, and so when I'm on that camp, Heat Wave is very, very, very difficult to get the extra 2 damage from, which means it's only generating 1 damage. And unlike Silken Form, you can't actually quell and use Silken Form on the same turn. And Heat Wave on the same turn unless you're up against exactly Icelander. And I think that's like a very big knock on the card for me, where it's only really generating 1 damage. At least whenever I try and make a very consistent Fi deck, I still do want it because it is still 1 point of damage, and 1 point can go a long way. But I just don't value it as highly as other people do, and I think that just comes with like me I'm not willing to put a second Phoenix Flame into my deck as other people are. Obviously, if I can build around it with like what is that card called?
Flame Call Awakening.
Yeah. So if I have like maybe 2 Flame Call Awakenings, then I would be very, very happy with a Heat Wave. But I think as a baseline, if I'm wanting other cards to make Heat Wave better, or like needing Heat Wave to make those cards better, I just want to be playing the generic Fi cards that are just standalone good on their own, so I don't have to worry about the like drawing them and drawing the other card together, or like I just don't ever want to be in a spot where on turn 2 I draw up and I see a Phoenix Flame in my hand on the draw. I just never want to be in that spot against any of the decks, so I just don't like having Phoenix Flame in the deck, which is why Heat Wave didn't make my top 10.
Yeah, that's totally reasonable. I think that it is definitely harder to get multiple damage out of, and I think it is it is on the weaker end, like of all the kind of like premium class equipment, it's probably the weakest of the bunch. But I guess I found it easy enough, even sometimes running 1 Phoenix Flame. Just like I found ways that I can loop it. It might also have to do with the way that I draft Fi. Fi is often a backup plan for me. I don't really like fighting over Fi too much, but sometimes if everything else feels cut, I will pivot into Fi. And so my Phi decks are often a little bit weaker, and sometimes that second Phoenix Flame is a thing that I just kind of have to run, and Heat Wave just kind of is like a, I don't know, makes it feel slightly less bad, even though I agree with you that I would much rather have only one, only the starting one in my graveyard and not have to draw into it. I think I need like two Flame Call Awakenings to justify the second one, is kind of where I'm at with Phoenix Flames and Phi.
So my number 5 is Evoke Kyloria. I think this is the best dragon. It's just so cheap to play. You can play it by pitching a red. You can have a high density of reds, and the on hit is very, very good at ripping cards out of your opponent's hand because they essentially need to use 2 cards to block it out, or they get hit by it and you draw a card. And if it's the same turn you played Kyloria, it has go again, so you get to play the card you drew, and if not, you can arsenal it. So I think this card is just like, it moves your opponent, like it forces your opponent to play, like to respect Kyloria so much, and they have to kill it the next turn. And if they can't, Kyloria can run away with the game. And unlike Dominia needing to reveal a red, this card is just, it doesn't require anything else for it to be good, which is why it's higher than Dominia for me.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense to me. I personally still value. I mentioned it before that Necria for me is I think the best dragon. But I think Kyloria is very close. I'm probably second best. It doesn't quite make the list for me, but it is definitely one of the cards that would make me move into Dromai. I think one thing I'm seeing here is that I kind of know this already. I definitely have a leaning towards Icelander. I tend to prefer that deck, and I feel like for you, Jay, that you tend to quite like Dromai, and I think I'm seeing why. It's part of why like I don't wind up in Dromai quite as much as you, is just maybe valuing some of these dragons just a little bit lower. But I agree, Kyloria is a really good card. Um, Perhaps maybe one reason I'm like underappreciating it slightly is I do find that Icelander has some ways to play around it. Spells to kill it when it's attacking, or even if you can't, it is. I think Icelander is the most well equipped to just throw in a Quell 1. Like if you have like a 0 cost, you doesn't like, you can just be like, oh, this is the perfect time to use my Quelling Slippers or whatever. So for that reason, maybe because I'm often sitting across from Kyloria, I often find it manageable. But I'm not happy when my opponent plays Kyloria. It is something I absolutely have to deal with, and it's still a very strong card. So yeah.
Yeah, I think just the difference between the Necria and the Kyloria, of like where the power level is at for me, is that I want multiple Kylorias and I don't want multiple Necrias. Where like if I have 4 Kylorias in my deck, I'm like pretty happy with my Dromai deck. Whereas if I had like 2 or 3 like Necrias in my deck, I'm pretty okay. I'm okay with it, obviously, but like I'm not like I'm not very, very happy, if that makes sense. But yes, I do agree with you that Kyloria is probably not as good against Icelander, but I feel like most of your matchup you're going to be playing against Phi anyway, and I like Kyloria against Phi a lot, and it just rips a lot of cards out of your opponent's hand when you attack with Kyloria, and then they have to hit it. So then now you have a full hand to swing back and like generate new dragons and so forth.
Yeah, fair enough. I think it's also very strong in the mirror, demanding the kind of like 2 card block and then a card to answer it is really good, considering the matchups like kind of grindy and value oriented. The fact that like it can kind of trade for like 3 cards in their deck a lot of the time is really strong.
What is your number? Oh no, you talked about your number 5 already.
Yeah, my number 5 is Silken Form.
Yep, my number 4 was Insidious Chill.
Yeah, and I had Necria as my number 4, so we've covered those.
Okay, so then number 3. I'm feeling that maybe we might be having the same number 3. Maybe not. I have number 3 as Mounting Anger.
Ah, I don't have Mounting Anger on my list actually.
Oh, you don't?
It's close. I almost put it on there, but then
You just don't have it in your top 10?
I just don't have it on my top 10. I think it's good, but
What? You don't
I
like
don't know.
1 for 5 go again? That doesn't require
I
anything?
I I don't draft five very much. What can I say?
Wow. This is like the one of the cards where like I see pack one, pick one, and I'm like, well, I guess I have to go fi.
I will sometimes speculate on this card, pack one, pick one. Honestly, if I can cut Icelander or Dromai with a strong Icelander or Dromai pick and pass this and put my neighbors on fi, I'm honestly pretty happy to do that. But it's a good card. It's definitely a good card. I should maybe value it higher than I do. I think it's a good card. I just don't find myself drafting fi very
Yes.
often.
One thing I do have to say though is I don't value the blue mounting anger almost at all, and the yellow one is also very not. It's not premium for sure, but the red one. I'm only talking about the red one here at number 3, essentially. I think the red one is just it just does so much. It goes so far in the mirrors, and it like asks your opponent to block it out. Like it, if your opponent doesn't block this card out in the 5 mirror, your one card doing essentially 5 damage with go again for free as a starter. It does so much, and I like this card a lot. This is probably my main reason why I'm even in fi is if I have like one or even two mounting anger reds, this is like my signal to be like I'm forcing fi. No one's gonna push me off of it.
Yeah, I think that's totally reasonable. Um, Again, it might have to do with how I draft fi, that it's often my kind of safety valve. And because of that, I feel like the zero costs are becoming increasingly sought after. Like people are just understanding how good the zero cost go agains are. And so I'm finding that I'm not getting that many zero cost starters. And I'm also not necessarily like I don't love Lava Vein Loyalty. I'll play it, but it's not my favorite. So I sometimes find that like I don't always have the zero cost to banish off of this. And I know that like yeah, Phoenix Flame is a thing, but that still means you need to have another starter. So I still think it's good. I agree that is really good, but like I guess in my head, like the heat wave is a +1. Mounting anger is kind of like a leg tap with a +1 attached to it. And like heat wave is like you start with a +1 in play. So to me, they're like kind of similar cards. Maybe you can argue that like the fact that it's also a starter makes it a higher pick. Yeah, I agree with you. Mounting anger is probably the best, definitely the best Fi starter, and maybe just the best Fi card that goes into your deck. But it's not on my list, which is maybe why I don't draft Fi very much.
Wow. So wait, well, I'm pretty sure I know the one of the other. It's not a fi card per se. It's well, we'll go into. We'll probably talk about it. So we'll just move on to the list.
Yeah. So my number 3 here is Spellfire Cloak. I am extremely happy to pack one pick one this card. I think that as Icelander, I really do want it. It often can enable a waning moon, which means that it's like 3, um, which is really powerful. And sometimes it can just fix awkward hands, or it can just like be like it's very easily just one life off of Quell. Um, and in combination, I think that you essentially need this card in the mirror. And if my deck does not have a Spellfire Cloak, I'm not super happy with it, especially if I ever have to play the mirror. But even outside of that, and this actually happened at the PT. I missed my Spellfire Cloak. I didn't get a chance to get one, even though I had a pretty good Icelander deck, and it cost me my first game. And if I played against the other Icelander in the pod, it would have cost me 2 games. So, um, yeah, for all those reasons, I think a Spellfire Cloak is my number 3 pick.
I actually have Spellfire Cloak at number 1. I think this is the most game defining card in Icelander, where the decks with Spellfire Cloak and the decks without Spellfire Cloak, I feel like does almost 3 points of damage more per game, which is like,
Hmm.
as we said, what's it called, Heat Wave. Heat Wave is typically one. I counted about like 1.5 extra points of damage. Silken Form, I counted at exactly 2, and maybe more if your opponent doesn't respect it, or you get to set it up in a real good spot. So it's like 2 and a little bit more with setup. For me, I find Spellfire Cloak to easily do 3 points of damage, and which is why, and it enables you to play the blue 2 costs. At blue, so they can play a blue 2 cost from your hand by pitching a blue, cracking the Spellfire Cloak to activate your Waning Moon for 3 more damage, which can swing games pretty heavily. And I think this card just does so much damage, so I have it at number 1. I just almost always want it. If I see a Spellfire Cloak, pack 1, pick 1. It's just that's my signal to start forcing Icelander, or at least like thinking about forcing Icelander. If I ever get past this card, oof.
It's pretty hard for me to pass this card as well. I guess I wasn't thinking of it purely as a pack one, pick one scenario. I might pack one, pick one this card, but well, we'll see. You want to go to number 2?
Yeah, so my number 2 is Sasha Sandakai. Sasha Sandakai is a draconic equipment. If you've played a red card, you can crack it at instant, and it generates 1 resource. This card is a little bit broken in the sense that like Fi typically is short 1 resource to go over the top of things by playing like 2 costs or a 1 cost at the start of your turn. And when you need this extra resource, it can easily provide you 2 or 3 point more damage, which is why I have it slightly underneath Spellfire Cloak, because I think Spellfire Cloak's a little bit more consistent, and Sasha Sandakai requires a little bit from your deck, which is why I have it slightly lower than Spellfire Cloak. But honestly, I was like, until the very end, I was like, which one do I put number 1, Sash or Spellfire Cloak? And I think both is pretty broken.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I have Sash also at number 2, I think for all of the same reasons. Spellfire Cloak is probably the card I like more because I favor Icelander. I guess I put Sash slightly higher just because it goes in 2 decks. But the good news is you don't really have to decide between these two. So I think it's like largely kind of irrelevant. And if I have one, I would, and I somehow get past the other, I would just pick them both, and then I'm set no matter what. Um, so so yeah, yeah, I totally agree. I think it's often worth like 5 off of a breaking point or something as well, or like critical strike, or like I don't know. Yeah, it can be worth a ton of damage in 5.
And my question is, I can't even think of what your number 1 card is.
Looking back, I probably valued this a little bit too high. I do think it belongs on the top 10, but maybe below these equipments. Maybe overvaluing the flexibility of the card. My number 1 is actually Erase Space. Again, just valuing Pauper. I think that it is better than Findles. I have found the hit effect to be surprisingly good. I feel like it's almost better in draft. The biggest thing that I like about it, because it is draft, I find that Fi decks they don't get to pick their cards as much. And I like that this card in particular really hoses Fi, I think. Like not always, but often enough. And Fi just also really doesn't like blocking. So this is a problem. And I think that often if you can cause them to, like, often this translates into like a missed Blade, or like if they have like a Lava Vein or a Blaze Headlong or something like that, it can really, actually I guess not Blaze Headlong, but a Lava Vein Loyalty in particular, or like if they're having to play the Cinder Skins, or I don't know. I've definitely seen a number of situations where I've played this and it's taken my opponent off an entire attack, and that just feels huge. And I think I really value the card that is especially good into Fi. I think it's also good into Dromai, um, just being a popper. And then into Icelander, I also value this card. Maybe in that matchup the least, but attacking Icelander for 6 is honestly often pretty good as well. So
Wow, I don't know if I can put erase face. Okay, maybe yeah. Probably should have put erase face on this list somewhere, but I can't. No way, it's better than Mounting Anger or Insidious Chill for me. I don't even think it's better than Kyloria for me, honestly. I can't see this card actually running away with the game. Where I think it's like it's definitely better than Fendel's Fighting Spirit because of the on hit. But is it better than Silken Form?
So here's where I said perhaps I maybe overvalued it. I put Erase Face because I feel like every deck wants to play the card, and I also feel like it's good in every matchup.
Yes, I think I agree with that.
I don't know that if there's another card in the set that I can say that about. So just the fact that it is so universally good in every deck, and like it's never going to be the all-star. It's not going to be the card that runs away with the game, but I think it's just like such it's just such a good card to pick up because it's always going to be relevant and it's always a main deckable card. So I guess I'm valuing the flexibility of it a lot. But I agree that perhaps some of the other picks are like more impactful. So yeah, perhaps I overvalued it a little bit, but I'm somewhat accounting for just its universal nature, not only in being generic, but also being good in all of the matchups.
Yeah, this card is like a really good card. Just overall, I would like if I have it in my pool, I would never cut it. Right? It's
Exactly.
at a point
Yep.
where if you have it at like a pretty high pick, you should pick it. Like pack one, pick one is probably even just a good pick because you get to stay open and have such a powerful card in your deck. It's like a great pack one, pick one. So I actually
Exactly.
like it in that sense of like it's a really good card that way. But that's like to me that feels like me picking like a Fendel's Fighting Spirit to stay open, and it's not really like, oh, I'm like the sick thing I'm doing with my deck is erase facing people. Like no one's gonna be like, oh, that guy has an erase face, so be careful of that card, right? Like, oh, maybe a little bit, but like it's not like oh that guy has I don't know, Insidious Chill, so like if they play it you lose kind of thing.
Yeah, I agree. I think we have similar thoughts about the card. I'm just maybe valuing the flexibility, or that's why I put it up so high. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's not the most exciting pick, but I think it is a very very solid one. Um,
It's like the responsible pick. Like you're being responsible
yeah,
about your draft.
and to be clear, if I have a pack with Erase Face and Spellfire Cloak, I'm not even 100% that I take Erase. Like I probably should take Erase Face, but I don't know if I can pass Spellfire Cloak.
If you pass Spellfire Cloak, you're cutting up you're cutting yourself off of Icelander, right? Like
Yeah, and that's just not something I want to do. Yeah, it's not something I want to do. So I don't know. I have some preferences in this set for sure. I will draft other heroes, and I'm thinking about maybe trying to draft Dromai a little bit more. But um, yeah, yeah. Race face, responsible pick, but I might pick some other ones over it just because I like the decks that they go in, and I wanna send a signal.
is the well, it is our first top 10. It looks like Yuki really likes flexible, responsible cards at number 1. And I just like big, splashy, lets me do everything cards.
Well, I think overall we were pretty close. Like we both had Sash and Spellfire Cloak in our top three.
Yeah.
So like a lot of the equipment was just very agreed upon, and I think that just speaks to how strong equipment is in general in draft, but maybe particularly in this set. I think that the strong equipment in this set are really, really, really good. Although there have been like historically extremely powerful equipment in just about every set, like Deep Blue, Aether Iron Weave,
Stubby hammers.
Snapdragon Scalers, Stubbies. Like there's usually at least a few that are you should be taking those over basically everything. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that is just like nature of the draft where in this game a lot of the cards are pretty flat where each of the cards generate about 3 points of value in block value or attack value in some sort of way. And if all of your cards do generate 3 points of value in some way, then having an equipment that generates the extra 1 point is what you need to win the game. And that that is what typically tips the scale of who gets the win if you guys are having a equal match.
Yeah. Just the fact that you're essentially starting at a higher life total than your opponent if you have better equipment than them, or they're starting at a lower life total than you, is it's just so powerful. It's it might be even it kind of reminds me of, like, for anybody who comes from Magic Draft, it kind of reminds me of the idea of lands being valuable because you get to play more of your picks, except it's even and like maybe especially in like a cube scenario where all of your cards, like cube is like a curated draft format where it's just like all the cards are typically really really good and you usually have no trouble getting playables. So in those formats often the lands are very high picks because you get to play more of your picks and it ups the consistency of your deck, and it's like one of the ways to make your deck stronger in such a strong draft environment. And in a way, Fab kind of reminds me of that because the power level, there's definitely like power cards that we discussed, but the power level is pretty flat, and even the bad cards are generally pretty okay. Uprising might be an exception. There's probably more bad cards in Uprising than some other sets. But yeah, it kind of reminds me of that concept, except it's like almost better because it starts in play. So it's like you don't even have to draw into it. It just gives you value every single game. So it's pretty hard to compete with.
Okay, I think that wraps up our top 10 list. Do you have any final comments?
No, I think that pretty much is it. Looking forward to Nationals draft, and maybe we'll have some stories to share for next time on how that goes. I'm sure we will. One thing I will say that I find is interesting about this set is, and I'm not sure if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I think that this set encourages preferences and leaning towards a hero more than other fab sets. And I think it's just because the packs are so thin and you have a little less time to pivot and stay open, and the generics are less flexible and powerful. So often it rewards you for going into a deck early, and so you kind of have to pick one, right? So I just noticed that a lot of strong drafters seem to have different preferences, and I think that they're all kind of viable, but I noticed that most people do lean one way or another.
Okay, then do you want to wrap us up?
Yeah. So thank you for listening to this week's episode of On the Bauble. We are actually short on listener questions. So if you have any questions for the show, please either comment on our most recent YouTube video. You can tweet at me. My Twitter is at YukiLiBender, or you can email at onthebobble@gmail.com. We'd really appreciate those questions and feedback. I think it adds a lot to the show being able to get that community feedback, and it's something that we didn't cover today, and it'd be nice to get some fresh set of questions. I know it's not always easy with the draft formats being quite spread out in Fab, but maybe even if you have topics just related to Flesh and Blood in general, we might start looking at more of those kind of like general Flesh and Blood topics, and maybe opening up the podcast to that to some degree as well in the future.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And if we didn't get to any of your questions that you sent us before, just send it in again. Just ask us again, and then we'll have easier to see it, so that we can actually pick it up.
Yeah, for sure. Also, if I think we're on most of the major podcasting platforms at this point, but if there is something that we're missing and you want to have the podcast added to that, and that's your favorite podcasting platform, just once again, reach out to us through the email or on Twitter or through a comment, and let us know, and we can always add it to more platforms. So just let us know. All right. I think that's going to wrap us up. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Sign off. let's talk about Nats and what heroes you want to play.
Okay.
So I'll start. Yuki handed me an Oldham list a couple days ago. I ordered all the cards for it, and I think that's what I'm gonna do. Looks like Oldham's winning a bunch of the bigger Nats, so you know what? I'm gonna tier whore, and I'm just gonna play Oldham.
Yeah. I think Oldham is a very powerful pick to take into this metagame. It's a hero that I've been practicing myself as well, which is not something I thought I'd be saying, but I think a lot of people are surprised. But I think he is very, very good.
Yeah, you complain every time about the Guardian mirror or you having to have to play Guardian at any point. You're gonna switch off of it, right? 100%. Like you're not gonna play Oldham.
Yeah, probably not. To be honest, I think that if my Nats had been this weekend, the one that had just passed, the same as Australia's nationals and France's nationals, and there's other countries as well, but those were kind of the ones that were streamed. I definitely would have been on Oldham. Oldham. I think people were sleeping on it a little bit. I think people had misconceptions about decks like the Battle Hardened list, which are more proactive. I think a lot of people still have Oldhim as a fatigue deck, and you need a plan into fatigue. And I think that that just the more that you're boarding fatigue against fatigue, the more that you get punished by these like proactive tempo-ish Oldhim decks. And I think it's just such a great choice, and people haven't really had the chance to like fully counter it. I know there are counters floating around. We've seen some Dash and Dromai, but I think people haven't really been fully targeting the deck as much as they're going to be. um I think the big thing that's moving me off of Oldhim is that if I was going to play it, I'm more excited about the aggressive one. But what I've been finding is that in the mirror, the more D reacts you have, the better you are. But that also makes the deck into something that I don't really want to play. And it also makes the deck not, I think, maybe not as good into some of your bad matchups like Icelander and Dash. And I think there's going to be some very good players at Canadian Nationals on Oldhim. So I kind of just I don't want to have to change my list to be the more defensive one. And I don't want to feel like I'm at a big disadvantage in the mirror. So because of that, I might be switching decks. I think that Dromai would be a good option. I don't really have the reps on it, so I might just be running Icelander. Don't have as much practice as I would like, but I do think that she's very good. She's just quite technical and quite challenging to play, and even build, honestly, I don't think that she's solved yet.
Are you not considering Lexi at all?
No, I had tested Lexi early on. My assumption was that she would be poor, and that is indeed the case. The Oldham matchup against the proactive deck is truly miserable. The defensive ones are actually fine. I think that you can go over the top of them pretty easily. But with the way that decks have been trending with like CNC pummels and just like playing more efficient attacks and more disruption is really hard for Lexi to deal with. On top of that, you still have the problem of like your aggro matchups are okay, but Dromai is picking up in popularity, and I expect Dromai to maybe be quite popular. And Dromai is also a hard matchup. Bravo is not great. Dash is depends what they do. It's winnable, but it's not always like I don't love playing if they're on a more controlling Dash style to counter the Oldham. So I just think that the meta is pretty hostile for Lexi. I'd like to bring her, but I can't see it right now. She's in a tough spot.
Yeah, so next time you bring Lexi, it's gonna be like a spot where Lexi's actually good, right?
Probably. I think I need to believe that she at least has like either that she targets the best deck or she has like a stronger matchup spread. But I think that there's just too many popular decks that are problems, and it's still my favorite deck, and I will always be working on it on the side. But I don't think that I just can't bring it to an event like this if I don't think that it's gonna give me a good chance of winning, and I don't. So I'm gonna go with whatever deck has the highest chance of winning the event.
Yeah, we have like more notable names now, right? In Canada now. I thought we had some random pro.
Yeah, so I guess the big Canada's already been pretty stacked. A lot of the people that play out of Harry Tarantula are on the East Coast are very strong. So there's Isaac Crute, who I yeah, there's Isaac Crute, Sean Dollywall, Dante had been taking a little bit of a break during Everfest, but Dante's back. We have Mike C, Nia Tran, who won Battle Hardened. So just like a whole bunch of
Oh, we have
people who
Tarek
have
here
top
too.
aided or won events, and then yeah, we have Tarek as a recent addition. So he played in he played in U.S. Nationals and won that, but he is a Canadian and has moved back home. So we now have Tarek at our Nats too. So it's going to be pretty stacked, and I think there's others. Joel, Aaron Chance. Yeah, there's a lot of very
Oh, there's
strong
Sean
players
too.
in Canada. Yeah, Sean Dollywall. Yeah, so it's going to be pretty tough. Demos. I haven't even mentioned Demos. Not necessarily on everyone's radar, but a really good Guardian player. He just doesn't have the most time to travel and grind events, but super talented. He top aided last time and very well could have run away with the event. But yeah, how it goes. So it'll be interesting. I think there's a lot of people that could take this nationals, and I think it's going to be a pretty stiff competition and should be a good event. I know Flake is playing too. I thought he would be commentating, but he's going to be playing, and I think he won a
Wait,
Pro
Flake's
Glass and stuff.
Canadian?
So yeah, Flake's Canadian, East Coast.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Well, either way, I need to top 8 this event or I don't get to play Worlds. So I have a lot on the line on this one. Easy, right? Yeah, Oldham, good deck.
Oldham good deck. I think if my goal was to top eight, I would probably take Oldham. Honestly, I think it might be the deck that gives me the best chance to top eight. I don't believe it's the deck that gives me the best chance to win, just because I think it's going to be hard for me to play the deck that I want to play and have an edge in the mirror. So that's why I'm leaning towards Icelander,
No.
but I'm not
Yeah,
decided yet.
I'm not trying to win this event either. I'm just like I'm there. I'm my goal is a 6-0 draft portion, 4-2 constructed, hit top 8, call it a weekend. That's what I need to do. I just want my Worlds invite. I don't have a PT. I missed all of my PTIs. I gambled my France funds away, so it's my last chance now.
Yeah, hopefully you'll make it and you'll be able to play Worlds. I know you'll probably go anyways because it's so cheap. It's very close for us, but it'd be nice to have you in the main event.
Yeah, the calling is worth going, I think. So, but I don't know if I actually don't make it, I might end up playing like Weiss Schwartz regionals in Vancouver here, where it doesn't even cost me like $100 to fly there, take a day off work, and I can play my favorite card game, Weiss Schwartz. Yeah, great.
That makes sense to me. I can imagine that, not being able to play in the main event and for your winning in, play KO and roll some dice and crush some people. I can imagine that being a pretty big letdown. So I get it. I guess we'll see. I think Nats and Worlds will be a lot of fun, but yeah, we'll update you next week, let you know how it goes. I think we've kind of prattled on long enough here, and that's going to wrap us up. But thanks for listening, everyone.
All right, good night.